Theresa, how long did you work for Gilbert Ortiz in the election department?
5 years in the election and 16 years total because I started in recording. He has to hire, to be able to open the ballots and stuff, it has to be a team of two. And one has to be a Dem and one has to be a Republican. If he can't find enough, we usually didn't have a problem finding enough Democrats. It was the Republicans that sometimes it was hard to find. There just weren't as many. So then he would hire maybe an unaffiliated voter, somebody that was registered as unaffiliated. Okay, but then even to count the ballots, the whole process, there has to be two separate affiliations. But like I said, in the office, in the main office, is when he would hire, like I said, it's like he wanted people that he could trust, that he knew wouldn't say anything if there was anything, kind of fishy going on around. So if we didn't have a Republican in the office, then he would have somebody who was a Democrat that we trusted switch their affiliation to Republican so that we could hire them, even though they were truly a Democrat. Counting ballots, weighing ballots, documenting where they came from, how many came from there, and then they would get them ready for the full-time county employee to run them through the machine. So you had two Democrats doing that same job. You had no Republican involved in that process. Older woman, she's got red hair, but she was one that refused to let Bo intimidate her whatsoever. And she even said it in her post, that she refuses to let him intimidate her.
And was she a Democrat?
She was a Republican. And she would come in and she would just be, happy and polite with him, as knowing that it was irritating him. But, and he'd even say it. He did not like having her in the office because she would right away turn around and, report back to the Republican headquarters or whatever. And we even had a couple of instances in the warehouse where they were Republicans and they were working, and somebody from the Republican Party, they would go out on their breaks or something and they would be conversing with people from the Republican Party. And he felt that they were leaking information to them right there in the parking lot or whatever. And he would get rid of a couple of them for that purpose, even though he couldn't prove that they actually had said anything to anybody or what they were talking to. He would have them disqualified or have them, removed or whatever. Tell them that
you'd have the Republicans removed?
Yeah, he would tell them that they violated the rules or whatever that were the guidelines for the judges. It's like they were reporting to somebody on their breaks or their lunches or whatever that were out in the parking lot waiting for them. And he didn't like that idea. A Republican judge that we hired that would be working in the warehouse, and it would be break time or lunchtime, and they would go out into the parking lot, and they were seen talking to other Republicans that weren't judges. That they were from the Republican Party. And that was a really big thing when Becky Mizell was the head of the Republican Party. I mean, Bo just could not stand Becky Mizell. In the office, and those were the people that basically saw everything that was going on. I mean, they were involved a little bit with everything, because the main office, everything would go through there. And like I said, there was one in the warehouse that did that also, that flipped her affiliation so that she could work.
So she was a Democrat and she worked in the elections every day, and she flipped to Republican just so she could keep her job?
Yep.
So there's a room upstairs where they store all the ballots. Is that true?
The warehouse, yeah.
They call it the warehouse?
Yeah, that bathroom.
So this lady said you were supposed to have two people would walk in there and they would sign in and check in. You're supposed to have it that way where 2 people go in to get boxes of ballots. You sign in date, time that you got in there. And then when you leave, you have to both go together downstairs and bring the ballots. She'd be up there with all the thousands of ballots. She had boxes and boxes of ballots.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd bring them downstairs. And she said, I'd be in that room all the time by myself, and the rules were actually 2 people in there, period. She says, but nobody give a shit because Bo just told you to do your job, and it didn't matter about following the rules, and you just did what you had to do. And she says, and then when I bring the boxes downstairs on a cart, I'd have to wait for somebody to show up to work, and they would have to bring them down with me. And I says, what was the purpose of that? Just so, so the public, in case they seen you alone with ballots? And she goes, I think so. She says, so I had to wait for somebody else to show up, but a lot of times I'd be in that room by myself, and we wouldn't sign in. And I was like, wow. And when I heard that, I was like, this is nuts.
Yeah, you did have to always have 2 people with you. It was pretty laxed upstairs. They were on camera upstairs, too, because the warehouse is on camera.
Uh-huh. And then she said at the end of the night, sometimes at midnight, and she's even seen it at midnight, usually around midnight, people go home, not every night, but she said there's been times at midnight she would leave, and she'd walk back in the building because she'd forget something. She's getting ready to leave. She'd walk back in, and she said that Tootsie, Brandy, and Gilbert were all in this office by themselves, the 3 of them, with ballots in the warehouse upstairs with the boxes.
Yeah, that's true. There were times when, especially on election night, I was usually there with them until we left. But there was plenty of opportunities for them to be, in that warehouse by themselves with all of those ballots.
And what's the reason that they're hanging out by themselves in a room full of ballots if they're not counting them? Like, why is
right.
Why is that room so important to hang out in when there's just all these ballots rather than just hang out downstairs where the public could see you?
Right. We didn't really have the downstairs is where the counting machine was, so there wasn't like really an office to hang out downstairs. Do you know what I'm saying? Because the main office is up on the 2nd floor, and then in the back of that same, it's the same room, but it's the back. There's just a wall in between the main office and the back room, and that's the warehouse. Mm-hmm. And then if you go through another door that's off to the side, that's where all of the blank ballots are stored.
Mm-hmm.
And the weird thing, I guess I thought was kind of weird, is that the cameras, because the polling location was in the front of the office, but there were no cameras on the employees within the office, the main office. There was no camera that caught anything there. There was in the warehouse, there was in the counting room, there was downstairs, there was in the front part of the office that was considered the polling location, but where the employees sat, the main employees, permanent employees, there were no cameras. I mean, if there's an election going on, you're not going to see Bo over a motor vehicle or recording. Majority, I'd say 80% of the time, he's in the election department. And it even used to be, he would actually even help enter data entry people's registrations. And then it got to the point where I guess somebody overheard me say, I was like, I wish Bo would stop entering these. He's not entering them correctly. We're having to go back and correct him. He's making duplicates, things like that. And then he said that he got to the point where he realized he shouldn't be handling any of that.
Duplicates of what? He's making duplicate to send out duplicate ballots?
He would make a keying error. If it was like 116 Duville apartment A1, and he accidentally put 116 Duville apartment B1, there were 2 ballots that were going out to that same person.
Wow.
that happens with the data entry, you know what I mean? But it was just weird. It was weird to me that he was handling voter registrations. Now that I look back on it, after he did screw me over and stuff, I mean, there was, you know, like that situation with the judges. I mean, I knew that was going on, but he approved it. You know what I mean? So I feel bad about that, but like I said, it had to go through him for the final approval, and he's the one that approved it. So, because we'd have individuals, we had regular employees that would hire the judges, and, you know, they would come to me and they're like, we don't have enough Republicans, blah, 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 but we can do this, we can do that. And I'd be like, well, let's talk to Bo about it and see what he says. And he'd be like, yeah, that's fine, go ahead and do it.
So he'd just be totally willing to say, yeah, if you were willing to switch, we'll keep you. If not, we got to get rid of you.
Right. Yeah, he, like you said, he would always say that he didn't care if you were a Democrat, if you were a Republican. You know, he, like you said, he ran a fair election. You know, he would always say you could come in and look at things, watch things, if you didn't believe him, if you wanted to question things, whatever. But he made it hard he made it harder than it needed to be on the Republicans.
The true Republicans.
Yeah. Like I said, he made it harder than it had to be for them. And especially like the watchers and stuff, because the watchers would question so much. Like during that recall for Angela Hedon, when they did that, and one of the judges, she was in there and she was questioning everything. And he actually got into an arguing match with her there in the polling location, telling her that she didn't have the right to do this, do that, and whatever. She was going to, you know, follow his rules, which he claimed were the state rules, because that's the first recall election we had in the Pueblo County. And if she didn't want to abide by it, that she could just leave. She would no longer be allowed in that polling location. Yeah, like I said, he definitely made it harder. He wasn't totally fair when it came to the Dems and Republicans. He made it really hard, a lot harder on the Republicans.
And how come nobody spoke out about this? Like, is it just because everybody kind of has a family to feed, and they're like, hey, I got a family to feed? And he's saying
in our office, we were, I would say we were anywhere from 80 to 90% Democratic employees.
Mm-hmm.
So
then,
we,
like hard Democrats, and is that with total even after flipping the affiliation, or is that you'd have 90% of staunch Democrats, but then they would flip it so it look legit?
Those are the judges that are hired for the election. I'm talking about full-time county employees. 80 to 90% of us were Democrats in that office.
How many percent?
I'd say 80 to 90% were Democrats in that office. Because he would even have not a hard time, but sometimes when you had to do things where you had, like I said, you had the opposite affiliation, and if we weren't able to get, I can't think of an example, we weren't able to get a judge there on that certain day for that, you were allowed to use an employee as long as they were that affiliation. And we would only have we'd have at least one, maybe two, that were either Republican or unaffiliated that we could use to fill that slot.
Wow.
It's 80 to 90% of full-time employees that work in the election office when I was there were Democrats. And now, like I said, looking back, it really wasn't fair. It wasn't, it was a lack of integrity. I don't want to say he brainwashed you, you know what I mean? But he just made you feel like that you were supposed to be on the defensive end with the Republicans.
Yeah.
And like you said, he would have his sister come in there with him, walking through the election department during the election times, his wife, his kids, his parents. There were active ballots.
They're active ballots, and they have access to the whole department.
Mhm. Yep. Even back into the warehouse where they were counting the ballots and stuff. Yeah. It was mostly, like I said, it was mostly in the front office because he did not want. He preferred that there weren't Republicans in there seeing all of everything that, because the main office, like I said, you see everything that goes on. I mean, when all the boxes are brought back by all the judges from the different locations, and when you go downstairs and you empty all of those 24-hour boxes, all the registrations come through, all the people that come in and complain, all the people that bring, like you said, about the deceased, these people no longer live here. Those people in the front office are the ones that see basically everything that goes on. So that to me was always most important part. And they worked the longest. They were there the earliest.
And he didn't want the Republicans back there doing that.
In the main office, right. So then that's when we'd have a Dem and a Republican, but that Republican was really a Democrat. Wow. And just flipped so that they could have that position.
Well, yeah, I keep hearing this over and over and over, and it's amazing. I'm glad I got to talk to you that you're the one that ran that department for over 5 years and worked there for 8, and you've seen it.
Yeah, like I said, and he said needing a job and stuff, you know what I mean, and being a Democrat, and he would always come in and, you know, tell us things, pumping, making the Democrats wonderful, and the Republicans were always sneaky, you know, always trying to wreck or, I don't know what word I'm looking for, the elections and stuff. You know, they were always looking for things that we were doing wrong. So he always kind of made it like, he always made us feel like we were on the defense against Republicans as county employees. Because I know even I felt like that, you know what I mean? Even towards Sharon sometimes when she would be in there, it'd be like, why is she doing that? Why is she, you know? But he always made his permanent employees that were Democrats very defensive towards the Republicans. That was the atmosphere in that office. That's how it was.
Wow.
And now, like I said, looking back, it really wasn't fair. There wasn't, you know, it was a lack of integrity. He I don't want to say he brainwashed you, you know what I mean? But he just made you feel like that you were supposed to be on the defensive end with the Republicans. And then you were talking about Adam and Victor Head. There was one time where Adam came in to question something when that election was going on, and he actually got in a verbal argument with him right there in the front office of the election office. And there was a security guard. We had security at that time for that election. And he actually had to go and break it up and ask Adam Head to leave.
Wow. Well, he probably cheated Victor Head out of a win.
Because that was his biggest threat, was Victor Head.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought Victor was going to win that one.
He probably did. If he's got access to those rooms of the ballots and he's hiring staunch Democrats and he's not playing fair. Yeah,
he definitely didn't play fair all the time. And like I said, looking back, I just thought that was a big lack of integrity for him to instill those ideas and feelings in his regular employees. He should have been nonpartisan with us. He shouldn't have made us feel that way towards the Republicans. But he would come in there and tell you stories and just make you feel that way, that you weren't supposed to trust him.